The evening sky carried a soft glow as Keanu Reeves sat alone in his quiet apartment, holding an invitation in his hands. It was not just any invitation. It was for his ex-wife's wedding. The simple white envelope carried more weight than any letter he had opened in years. The words were polite, formal, almost cold, yet underneath them he could feel something heavier. She was marrying again, and he was being asked to come. Keanu read the lines over and over, his heart steady yet heavy. He had always been a man who walked through storms with silence, but tonight the storm was inside him. The first 5 minutes of the story begin here, with the silence of that invitation. The kind that presses against the heart and refuses to let go. He had loved her once with all he had, and though years had passed, the memory of that love had not left him. People often imagine Keanu as the man who is untouchable, the man who walks through life with calm strength. But behind that strength was always a heart that felt deeply, a heart that carried scars. The night stretched long as he thought about whether to go. Friends told him he did not need to. Some said it would hurt too much. Others said it would be disrespectful to her new husband if he appeared. But Keanu was different. He believed in respect, in kindness, in humility, even when the world gave no reason for it. He remembered the good moments with her, the times when life was simple, when love was young. And he thought to himself, maybe attending her wedding was not about him at all. Maybe it was about showing her that despite the past, despite the heartbreak, he could still wish her happiness. But there was conflict inside him. His mind pulled in different directions. What if seeing her again broke him apart? What if her family, who once had loved him, looked at him with pity? What if her new husband felt threatened by his presence? The doubts were sharp, but deeper still was something stronger. He did not want to live his life running from pain. He believed that facing the hardest moments often brought out the greatest strength. As the day of the wedding drew near, Keanu prepared himself quietly. He bought a simple suit, nothing too new, nothing to stand out. He did not want to shine brighter than the groom. He wanted only to be present, respectful, a quiet figure in the crowd. On the morning of the wedding, he stood before the mirror. The face that looked back at him was calm but tired. His eyes, deep and soft, carried the weight of many stories untold. He smiled faintly to himself, not out of joy, but out of acceptance. The drive to the ceremony was long, filled with silence broken only by his thoughts. He remembered the first time he met her, the first time he held her hand, the first time they laughed until tears filled their eyes. Love had once been their language. Now silence was all that remained. When he arrived, the church doors stood tall, decorated with white flowers that carried the scent of new beginnings. Guests in elegant clothes walked in with smiles, laughter echoing across the courtyard. Keanu stepped out of his car quietly, adjusting his suit, and walked slowly toward the doors. Inside, the ceremony had not yet begun. The air was filled with whispers and music. Some guests recognized him, their eyes widening, their whispers rising. But Keanu did not mind. He walked with calmness, as though every step was a promise to himself to carry dignity no matter what happened. He found his seat near the middle rows, not too far, not too close. As he sat down, he saw her. She had not yet walked down the aisle, but she was standing at the far end, speaking with her family. Her smile was warm, her face glowing with the light of a new life. For a moment, Keanu's chest tightened. It was not jealousy, it was not regret. It was the recognition of a chapter closed and another beginning. What he did not know was that his presence would soon change the entire atmosphere of that wedding. It was not his fame, nor his silence, but the words he would eventually speak that would leave the hall breathless. But for now, as the music began and the crowd rose to their feet, Keanu stood with them, his heart steady, his eyes calm. He whispered to himself that this was not about the past, but about respect. And in that moment, he promised to face whatever came next with grace. The music grew louder as the bride began her walk down the aisle. The crowd turned, eyes shining, smiles rising, as the woman Keanu once loved stepped forward in her wedding dress. Every step she took was graceful, carrying a beauty that seemed untouched by time. Her gown was simple but elegant, and her face was filled with a kind of peace Keanu had not seen in her for many years. He watched her not with longing but with quiet respect. Inside his chest, however, memories began to stir. He remembered the first time he saw her in white years ago, when it was his hand she was walking toward. The church back then had been different, but the feeling of a room filled with hope was the same. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow breath, grounding himself in the present. This was not about the past, he reminded himself. This was about honoring the moment she was living now. The groom stood tall at the altar. He was younger than Keanu, confident, and his smile was bright. There was no arrogance in him, only joy. He looked at her as though she was the only person in the world. Keanu studied his face carefully, not out of envy, but curiosity. He wanted to see the kind of man she had chosen. He wanted to understand what kind of heart she now trusted with her life. When she reached the altar, the ceremony began. The priest's words echoed through the hall, speaking of love, loyalty, and new beginnings. Every sentence carried weight. Keanu sat quietly, his hands folded, his body still, his eyes soft. But inside, waves of emotion rose and fell. There was pain, yes, but also pride. She had found happiness again, and even if he was not part of it, he could still respect it. Yet not everyone in the room felt the same. Whispers spread like ripples across the guests. Some whispered about Keanu's presence, others about his past with her. Old friends exchanged looks, some sympathetic, some curious. A few wondered why he had come at all, but Keanu ignored the noise. He was here for her, not for them. Then came the moment of vows. The groom spoke first, his voice strong, filled with promises. He spoke of protecting her, cherishing her, building a future with her. Every word carried conviction. When it was her turn, her voice trembled slightly, but her words were tender and honest. She spoke of second chances, of healing, of finding love again after pain. Keanu felt each word like a quiet echo, because in some way he too had been part of the pain she spoke of. As the vows ended, the priest paused and asked if anyone had anything to say before the couple was joined. The room fell into silence. Most people expected nothing, but all eyes drifted, almost naturally, toward Keanu. It was as if the whole room was waiting for him to stand, to say something, to break the silence. Keanu felt the weight of their eyes on him, but he remained seated calm. He had not come to interrupt, nor to bring shadows into a day of light. He simply bowed his head, showing respect, and allowed the ceremony to move forward. But that silence carried power. The guests who had doubted his presence now looked at him differently. They saw not a man clinging to the past, but a man strong enough to let go with grace. When the couple finally kissed and the hall erupted in applause, Keanu stood with the rest, clapping gently. His smile was faint, but genuine. He had survived the hardest part, watching her marry another man. But what none of the guests knew was that the most powerful moment of the day had yet to come. Because at the reception, when laughter and music filled the room, and when the groom approached Keanu directly, everything would change. What Keanu would say to him, with the whole room listening, would silence every whisper and leave behind a lesson no one would forget. The ceremony ended, and the guests began to move toward the reception hall. Soft music played, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. Tables were covered with white cloth, decorated with flowers and candles that gave the room a warm glow. People congratulated the bride and groom, offering hugs, shaking hands, smiling for pictures. The atmosphere was joyful, almost overflowing with energy. Keanu walked in quietly, keeping to the side. He did not draw attention to himself, though many eyes still followed him. Some whispered, some simply stared. A few guests even approached him politely, unsure what to say. He greeted them with small nods and kind smiles, never giving the impression that he was uncomfortable. But deep inside, every step felt heavy. He chose a seat at the edge of the hall, not too far from the crowd, but far enough to give them space. He was not here to be the center of the story. He wanted to blend into the background, though blending was impossible when so many people knew who he was, both as a man and as her past. The bride and groom eventually entered the reception hand in hand. The room rose in applause, cheering them on as they walked to the center table. Her smile was brighter than before, her joy clear. Keanu watched, his heart steady, reminding himself again that this day belonged to her, not to him. After the first dances and a few speeches, the groom began moving around the hall, speaking with guests. Keanu saw him from a distance, laughing, shaking hands, looking strong yet humble. There was something about the way he carried himself that caught Keanu's attention. The man was not boastful. He did not look down on others. He treated each person with respect, and then it happened. The groom noticed Keanu sitting quietly at his table. He paused, spoke softly to his wife for a moment, and then began walking toward him. The room seemed to shift as people noticed. Whispers rose again, eyes turned, and silence slowly spread across the hall. Keanu stood as the groom approached. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight. Respect met respect in that moment. The groom extended his hand first, his expression polite, though his eyes carried curiosity. "Thank you for coming," the groom said softly. Keanu shook his hand firmly, his voice calm. "It was important to me." The silence of the hall grew deeper. Guests leaned closer, straining to hear. Some expected tension, some even hoped for conflict. But what they saw instead was two men standing with quiet strength. The groom smiled faintly, but his eyes searched Keanu's face. I know what you mean to her. I know what you once were in her life. I'll be honest, it surprised me to see you here, but it also shows something. Not many men would come. Keanu's eyes softened. He spoke slowly, his voice steady, each word clear. She deserves happiness. I may not have been the one to give it forever, but I will always respect her. Today is not about me. It's about her future, and now that future is in your hands. The words were simple, but they carried power. The room fell completely silent. No clinking glasses, no whispers, just silence. Everyone listened, hearts pulled closer to the moment. The groom nodded, his voice lower now. Thank you. I promise you I will protect her, I will honor her, I won't let her down. Keanu held his gaze, and for a moment it felt like the whole room was frozen. Then Keanu smiled, faint but real. Then I wish you both nothing but peace. Take care of her the way she deserves. That is all I could ever ask. The silence that followed was not heavy, it was filled with awe. Guests who had doubted his presence now saw something entirely different. This was not a man clinging to the past. This was a man strong enough to let go, kind enough to bless the future, humble enough to step aside with grace. And though the music soon returned and laughter filled the hall again, that moment between the two men remained in every heart present. They had witnessed something rare, something unforgettable. But for Keanu, the night was not finished. Because before he left, one final conversation would take place, one that would reveal the deepest truth of all. The reception grew louder as the night continued. Laughter circled the tables, the dance floor filled, and the joy of celebration carried through the room. Yet even as music played, many guests kept replaying the moment between Keanu and the groom in their minds. The silence he had created, the respect he had shown. It was something rare, something people would remember for years. Keanu returned to his seat quietly, but his heart was still steady. He felt a strange calm, as though the hardest part of the night was behind him. Still, there was one moment left, when he could not avoid forever. He knew she would come to him, and she did. The bride excused herself from her guests, her dress flowing softly as she made her way across the hall. When she reached him, she did not speak right away. For a few seconds, she simply stood there looking at him, her eyes carrying both gratitude and sadness. Keanu rose slowly, respecting the weight of the moment. "You came," she whispered at last. Her voice was soft, almost breaking. Keanu gave a small nod. "I had to, not for the past, for today, for you." She looked down, her hands trembling slightly as she held her bouquet. "I wasn't sure if inviting you was the right thing. I didn't know how you would feel." Keanu's gaze was gentle, his words quiet but firm. "It hurt, yes, but sometimes pain has its place. Sometimes it reminds us of what we've survived. I don't hold anger, I don't hold regret. I only hold respect for what we had and for what you've found now." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. "You were a part of my life that shaped me. Even in the hard times, even when we couldn't stay together, you gave me memories I'll never forget. I want you to know I never stopped wishing good for you." For the first time that night, Keanu's voice softened with emotion, almost cracking. "And I never stopped wishing the same for you." The silence between them was deep, but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who once shared everything and now shared nothing but respect. Then she leaned closer, her words low so only he could hear. "There's something I need you to know. He's not threatened by you. In fact, he admires you. Before the wedding, he told me that if you did come, he wanted to shake your hand. He said, any man she once loved is part of who she is today. And if he helped her become who she is, I should thank him, not resent him." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the weight of those words. Humility, kindness, respect, it was rare to find in another man. And suddenly the twist of the night revealed itself. This was not about rivalry. This was not about jealousy. It was about legacy, the quiet legacy of love that transforms into respect when time changes everything. She placed her hand lightly on his arm, her voice trembling again. "He is a good man. I know you can see it. But part of my strength today, part of who I am, it will always be because of you. And I wanted you here not just as a guest, but as a reminder that love in its purest form doesn't disappear. It changes, it teaches us, and it lasts in ways we don't always expect." Keanu looked at her, his heart heavy yet light at the same time. He wanted to say many things, but only one came out. "Then I am glad I came, because now I see letting go does not mean losing. It means honoring what was and blessing what will be." Her tears finally fell, but her smile was soft. She whispered, "Thank you." In that moment, the weight lifted from Keanu's chest. The conflict, the doubt, the whispers of the crowd, none of it mattered anymore. He had faced the storm and walked out with peace. But the night still held one final moment, because before he left, he would speak once more, not to her, not to the groom, but to everyone, and his words would leave the room in complete silence once again. The night had grown deeper. The music was still alive, glasses raised, and laughter circled the room, but beneath it all there was a current of quiet curiosity. Many guests had seen Keanu and the bride speak privately. Others had noticed the warmth between him and the groom. Whispers flowed like gentle waves, but everyone seemed to be waiting for something more, though they did not know what. Keanu felt it too. A pull, a sense that the night was not yet finished. He had spoken to the groom, he had spoken to her, but there was something left unsaid, something that belonged not to one person but to everyone in the room. As the reception host invited more guests to make speeches, Keanu stayed seated at first. He listened, smiling faintly as friends and family shared stories, laughter, and blessings for the couple. Then, when the room grew quiet again, Keanu rose slowly from his chair. The movement alone was enough to hush the hall. The host paused, eyes wide, before nodding respectfully and stepping aside. All eyes turned to him. Some held curiosity, some respect, and some carried doubt. But the silence was complete. Keanu stood tall but calm, his hands resting gently in front of him. His voice, when it came, was steady and low, yet it carried across the hall. "I was not sure I would come tonight," he began, his words simple, his tone soft. "Sometimes the past feels too heavy to stand in the presence of the future, but I came not because of the past and not because of myself. I came because she deserved to see that love, even when it changes, can still carry respect. And he deserved to know that I wish them only peace." The guests leaned in, their hearts caught in his honesty. "Marriage," he continued, "is not about never falling. It is about rising together even when the world makes it hard. I once walked beside her, and for a time our paths were the same. Those paths changed, but the lessons did not fade. What I learned with her helped shape me, and what she learned with me helped shape her. For that I am grateful." His eyes shifted toward the groom, steady and sincere. "And now her path is with you. I saw tonight that you are a man of honor. I trust you will protect her, cherish her, and never take her light for granted. That is all I ask, not as her past, but as a man who respects the journey that brought her here." The hall was silent, breaths held, not a glass raised, not a whisper dared. Then Keanu looked around the room, his voice softening further. "To everyone here, remember this. Love is not always about possession. Sometimes the purest form of love is letting go, while still wishing the other person joy. Kindness costs nothing, but it leaves a mark greater than anything else. Humility may feel like silence, but in truth it speaks the loudest." His words settled like a gentle weight on every heart. No one moved, no one spoke. For a long moment the reception was wrapped in stillness. Keanu finished simply, bowing his head slightly. "Thank you for letting me witness this day. May your love grow stronger than time itself." When he stepped back, the silence broke, not with whispers, not with scattered applause, but with a single, powerful wave of clapping that rose from every corner of the hall. Guests stood to their feet, their faces filled with awe, some with tears. It was not the applause of a crowd to a famous man. It was the applause of human hearts touched by something greater than pride, greater than pain. Keanu sat again quietly, not basking in it, not claiming attention. His role here was not to shine, it was to remind. And he had done just that. But as the night drew closer to its end, there remained one final chapter, the quiet goodbye. The moment when Keanu would leave not just the hall, but a part of himself behind forever. The night began to fade as the last songs played and the laughter softened. Guests slowly left their tables, some heading to the dance floor, others gathering near the doors. The air still carried joy, but it also carried a sense of completion, as though the day had already written itself into memory. Keanu sat quietly for a while longer, watching the couple. She laughed freely, her hand never leaving her new husband's. The way he looked at her, steady and full of warmth, made it clear she was safe, she was loved. Keanu felt no bitterness in his chest, only a strange peace. He knew it was time to go. He did not want to linger until the end, to risk shifting the attention away from them. He rose from his seat, adjusting his suit, his movements calm and steady. A few guests noticed, their whispers soft, their eyes following him. Some looked with admiration, others with wonder. But no one stopped him. They understood this was his moment of farewell. As he walked toward the door, the groom noticed. He excused himself from a group of guests and hurried over, his steps quick but respectful. "Are you leaving already?" he asked gently. Keanu gave a small smile. This is your night, not mine. I've seen enough to know she is where she belongs. I don't need to stay longer than that. The groom's eyes softened. He reached out his hand once more. Thank you for coming. I will never forget what you said tonight. Keanu shook his hand firmly, his voice steady but kind. Take care of her, that's all that matters. Then she appeared beside them. The bride, her eyes glistening with tears she tried to hold back, stepped forward. For a brief moment, time felt like it stopped. Keanu, she whispered, her voice shaking. He looked at her, his expression calm, almost gentle. You don't need to say anything more, he said softly. I already know. She nodded, though a tear escaped her eyes. She leaned in and hugged him lightly, the embrace brief but filled with years of unspoken emotion. When she pulled away, her smile was small but real. Thank you for everything. Keanu gave her a final nod. Be happy, that's all I ever wanted. With that, he turned and began walking toward the exit. The music played behind him, the laughter of guests rising once more. But as he reached the doors, the room grew quieter, as though every person present knew they were witnessing the closing of something greater than just a chapter in two lives. He stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars shone above, the world silent except for the distant hum of the city. Keanu took a deep breath, the weight on his chest finally gone. He had come carrying questions, doubts, and pain. He left carrying nothing but peace. As he walked to his car, he whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, Love does not end. It changes. It teaches. And sometimes letting go is the purest way of holding on. He opened his car door, sat inside, and with one last glance at the glowing lights of the reception hall, he drove away slowly into the night. Not as a man broken, not as a man lost, but as a man who had shown the world that respect, humility, resilience, and kindness will always speak louder than anything else. The wedding went on without him, but the silence he had left behind in people's hearts remained. And for those who had seen it, who had heard him, they carried home a lesson that night. True strength is not in holding on, it is in letting go with grace.